All right, so let's talk about some deep squat mobility while we go through our kinesiology terms. All right, so I just worked out, I did a little leg day, so I want to work on some mobility afterwards. Remember, as you're working with older clients, older patients, older athletes, but really anyone, you can't do mobility with your strength training enough. All right, so check it out. I'm in my deep squat. If you can hold your deep squat, maybe an assisted deep squat, hold on to something, a doorknob, a door, hang out in this position and pay attention to what's going on. That was part of the lab we worked on this week, so check it out. I can face straight on. If I want to go total sagittal plane, check out how my body feels in a sagittal plane in this extreme kind of range of motion position. My ankles are dorsiflexed, my knees are flexed, my hips are flexed, right? All in the sagittal plane. If I'm slouching it all over, right, I'm going to be slouched in this kyphotic position a little bit, right? My upper back can flex. That's another flexion. That's all sagittal plane. All right, let's go back to the ankles. When we talk about the ankles, I can sit in this dorsiflexed position, right? And then pay attention to this, part of the questions we asked today. Do I feel any tightness or anything going on? Remember, we talked the difference between osteo-kinematics versus arthro-kinematics. We want to know the difference. Osteo-kinematics is just flexion or extension. Osteo, think bones. How are the bones relating to each other? Right? So my tibia bone, how is it relating to the rays of my feet, my metatarsals, my tarsals, okay? But the arthrokinematics are what's important, especially with something like ankle mobility. I can feel my left ankle get a little tight. I can feel my medial malleolus, right? We talk about medial versus lateral. Medial being along the midline, laterals on the outside. I can feel my medial malleolus on my right ankle. On my left ankle, I feel a little bit more of my talus. So I know my arthrokinematics, arthro being articulation, joint, right? So joint kinematics. That's what arthrokinematics is. How well is the joint sliding and gliding? How well is it rolling? How well is it spinning in the joint, right? Those are your arthrokinematic motions that we will talk about. If my talus is not gliding well, or if it's stuck anteriorly maybe, it feels like it's a little impinged. That's kind of what I got going on right now. I had a high ankle sprain in graduate school, which tore my tib-fib ligament, my tibia and my fibula, spread out kind of anterior and posteriorly. All right, so arthro and osteo. If I'm gripping the floor quite a bit here, if I lean back some, if I lean forward, my toes grip the floor, I'm feeling my intrinsic muscles working. We talked about intrinsic, right? Muscles that affect the body part that they are within versus extrinsic muscles, all right? My gastrocnemius is an extrinsic muscle. My flexor, my hallux flexor, or digitorum, I'm going to screw up muscles. I'm not too concerned about muscles right now. I'm more concerned with general body parts than what we're talking about. So check it out. My big toe muscle is going to go up the back of my calf muscle, go a little bit laterally. All right, so that's an extrinsic muscle because the muscle belly is up in my calf, right? But the tendon is inserted into either my big toe bones, right? Or my the bones of my foot. That makes it an extrinsic muscle because the muscle belly is outside of the body part that it's affecting or moving, okay? So think about intrinsic versus extrinsic muscles, all right? Now, if I want to change this form, everyone's doing okay in your squat, right? Maybe you're still holding on. Maybe you need to change position. So how do you change position? I can go wider, all right? If I go wider, what did I just do, okay? Now, technically, my ankles are still dorsiflexed in the sagittal plane. My knee is still dorsiflexed in the sagittal plane, okay? But my hips just changed quite a bit. If my toes are pointing out 20 or 30 degrees, my hips abducted, sort of horizontally abducted, but abducted because they're in this extreme flexed position, my hip joints are. I also externally rotate a little bit. If I push out on my knees and kind of work on that mobility, I can rock forward, so rock forward into that dorsiflexion on both sides, right? We tested our hip mobility and our ankles and our knees and our hips in all three planes, right? The sagittal plane, the frontal plane, side to side, and then also the transverse plane. So when I go out here, I'm testing the frontal plane. I'm testing the transverse plane as well in my hips. So make a note of that as we go through this lab, all right? I begin to feel my lower back a little bit. So my lower back, my mid back, all right, it begins to flex some. So I got to come back up straight again, working my rectus spinae, but that's for another time. We're staying in the lower body right now, okay? So there's some terminology we need to know. To look through the sheet, We talked about the joint-by-joint approach, which is a pretty nice theory and philosophy on just how to generally assess mobility and stability throughout the body. Remember, my toes are mobile. I need mobile toes. When you get turf toe, as I've had from a car accident, if someone has a bunion, they lose mobility in their toes. That can cause problems with athletic and normal walking movements, all right? If they cannot dorsiflex their big toe, for example, okay? The arch needs to be more stable. Stable does not mean stiff. It just means that your arch muscles need to work. If you're doing a squat, if you're moving, if I already squat out of this hole, okay, I'm going to use my arches, I'm going to squat through my midfoot, right? My midfoot needs to be strong and stable, okay? My ankle needs to be mobile. My knees need to be more stable. My hips need to be mobile. That's a lot of mobility, right? If I can do internal rotation and move my hip joint one way or the other, I need that mobility, right? So that's internal rotation of my hip. Back to external rotation, okay? So you can check that out. We did the ankle wall drill going into half kneeling. I'm going to cheat and come out of my squat for a second, but I'm going in and out of this, testing how far or how close I can get to the wall per toe, right? And then I can work this ankle mobility. But again, being in my squat, I'm working this ankle mobility pretty well, okay? Two reasons for ankle joint lack of mobility. I already talked about that. Compare your arthro versus your osteo-kinematics. Look up those ideas, see what they mean, and give an example of what osteo-kinematic effect you may have, like a tight soleus maybe, or stiff soleus, versus the arthro-kinematics of the joint. We talked about that. Your 90-90 stretch, if I drop into my 90-90 stretch, okay, I can be here. That's the 90-90. Both knees are at 90 degrees. My hip is at 90 degrees coming off the line of my pelvis. My back knee is at 90 degrees. So we talked about what that looks like. Staying tall, and we can go through various motions here. My front leg is flexed with external rotation. My side leg is abducted with internal rotation. All right, so that's the 90-90 test, and just talking about briefly discussing what you feel in each leg there. All right, everything else is pretty straightforward. This is another position though we work on T-spine mobility, because if I cannot extend my spine, my upper spine, my my chest spine is my thoracic spine, we just call it T-spine, that might make this position that much more difficult. Some people have the lower body to get into this position, but they're flexed like this. They're stuck in this position. We want to come out of this position, reach high if we can out of this position, okay? Everybody's doing well in their deep squat. And then we talked about stability. So we talked about plank stability. If I go into a quick plank, I'm here, and I am testing, what do my knees look like? Are my knees dropping? Can I keep them relatively straight? What do my hips look like? Am I dropped? Can I control my pelvis? We talk about stability and motor control. Are my hips up too high, which usually means I'm using my hip muscles too much, my hip flexors and not my abdominal muscles. I want to be able to go here, tuck my tail some. And then how about my scapular control? My shoulder girdle. Am I just hanging on my meat there, hanging on my serratus? Or can I protract just enough to hold stability there? My knees, my pelvis, my lumbar spine, and my shoulder girdle are all stable in that plank position. Good, drop back into my deep squat. Maybe we can hold a pistol squat just for a little bonus. All right, each side there. All right, so there's a quick review. All these terms that I just said are things that we need to know in basic fundamental kinesiology and biomechanics. All right, so our functional anatomy, we went through them, and that's good. I'm going to stay for about another 2 minutes, so I will catch you next time.